Musicals are an optional minigame in Pokémon Black, White, Black 2, and White 2. After choosing a song to perform and a Pokémon to use, players get the chance to put accessories on their Pokémon. Next is the actual musical performance, where players really don't do much of anything. The 4 participants' Pokémon hop around the screen in time to the music. If they're holding an accessory in their hands, players can choose to do an appeal at any time. The Pokémon then does a simple predetermined animation with their prop, such as spinning around a cane or tossing a bouquet. Successfully pulling off an appeal without another Pokémon interrupting increases your score. At the end of the musical, each Pokémon gets graded on their appeals and how much their dress-up matches the theme of the song. The better your Pokémon does, the more props you can get from audience members after the show is over. And that's it. I have seen people point to musicals as one of Black and White's flaws, and it's easy to see why. Pressing the appeal button barely counts as gameplay, and Pokémon without hands can't perform appeals at all. There's hardly anything of substance here. But is it possible that musicals aren't that bad? Back in the day, when everyone and their mother wanted to hate on Black and White, I definitely saw my fair share of people claiming that the games are irredeemably bad because musicals are bad. It should go without saying that this argument is made entirely in bad faith. There's more to the games than musicals. In fact, in the main series Pokémon games, you're a Pokémon trainer first and foremost. For example, in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it's possible to sidetrack your quest to earn all the badges, to instead grind out each and every contest rank in Slateport City. But doing this doesn't help you progress through the game. No matter how many pretty ribbons you get on your Pokémon, you can't complete the game without being a trainer. The primary focus of Black and White is storytelling and battling, so the quality of musicals shouldn't be a deal breaker for anyone. In other words, while we shouldn't deny musicals' shortcomings, we don't need to shine a spotlight on them either. Nothing is perfect, but sometimes imperfections don't hamper a game's overall experience. This is definitely the case for musicals, even in Black and White, which have less extraneous features compared to their sequels. Musicals may seem like a shortcoming, but that's honestly okay. If we insist that no game can be perfect, then that means they would all inevitably have some number of shortcomings, and it's best for said shortcomings to be in a feature that's easily ignored, rather than a feature that's crucial to the game's completion. And when I say easily, I mean easily. In terms of rewards, musicals are so inconsequential that there's absolutely no practical benefit to completing them. There are no ribbons to earn in the 5th generation Pokémon games, so your musical superstar won't have any indicator of their achievement in future generations. The real reward for doing musicals is entirely superficial and easily skippable. The more musicals you do, the more props you receive, and getting all 100 props is one of the achievements required to upgrade your trainer card color, specifically in Black and White, not even Black 2 and White 2. Trainer card upgrades often make use of silly, one-off features like this, such as Fire Red and Leaf Green requiring the player to jump 200 times in a row in the Pokémon Jump minigame and pick 200 berries in the berry picking minigame, both of which are mandatory co-op. Musicals being used for the game's trainer card levels is par for the course, but since that's all they're used for, it also makes them easily ignorable. Musicals are also easily ignorable narratively. In all fairness, Black and White are over 10 years old at this point, and with how inaccessible copies of the games are, it's unfortunately understandable that people who discuss them don't always know exactly what they're talking about. It isn't uncommon for people to think that before leaving Nimbasa City, Bianca drags you into the musical theater to perform a musical with her. Afterwards, you and Bianca leave the theater and find her father waiting outside. Except this isn't actually what happens. Bianca makes you play a round of dress-up, yes, but not the entire musical. Bianca leaves the building after the dress-up session, and you have every bit of freedom to simply walk out after her. If you choose to stay behind and play an entire musical, that's your choice. But Black and White do not stop players to force them into an entire musical minigame. The games are actually very careful to ensure that such an unnecessary feature is entirely optional, rather than needlessly forced upon the player. The focus on the dress-up segment of musicals is also pretty clever. It allows for the passage of time, giving Bianca's father the chance to show up and move her character arc along. It also gives players a chance to see Bianca trying out new things as she attempts to determine her future goals. But it also draws attention to how much Black and White focus on improving and streamlining past series mechanics. Just like how Black and White's HMs are optional exploration tools rather than required for progression, musicals are an attempt to streamline an earlier series feature. At the time of their release, people enjoyed the idea of Ruby and Sapphire's contests, but widely agreed that they weren't too great in practice. Aside from feeding your Pokémon a limited number of Pokéblocks, contests are nothing more than a few rounds of selecting a move to use. It's cool for attacks to have an additional use besides their battle properties, but it isn't practical to pull off clever combos as was expected. The randomness of your opponents in each round leads to more frustration than strategy, and this wasn't entirely ironed out even in Ruby and Sapphire's remakes 12 years later. When Diamond and Pearl rolled around, people were happier with the dress-up and dance minigame segments in Super Contests because you have total control during them. There are no unpredictable opponents, just you, your accessory collection, and your rhythm skills. But the pseudo-battle portion of Super Contests still aren't great. Enter musicals. Put simply, they're Super Contests without the battle part. There was definitely potential here. Taking out the rhythm minigame was streamlining things a bit too much, but dressing up your Pokémon is still fun, and there's a certain charm to watching them dance around the stage. Musicals aren't entirely bad. They're a bit boring, with definite room for improvement, but ultimately inoffensive. To put it another way, would musicals being better actually improve Black and White? People who love Black and White already do so in spite of musicals' shortcomings. And I somehow doubt that the people who still complain about Trubbish's existence and Univa's linear design would start singing Black and White's praises had musicals been a better minigame. We can see this idea in practice thanks to X and Y. X and Y have blatant flaws in both the gameplay and narrative departments, but they also have copious amounts of incredibly fun side content. I yearn for Pokémon Ami's charming minigames. The character customization options are fantastic, and depending on your tastes, they can still hold up as some of the series' best. The Battle Chateau is a great way to earn money and challenge gym leaders to rematches. Trainer PR videos are fun little distractions that make good use of the new 3D graphics capabilities. And that's just the start. But nearly all of these amazing features go forgotten because the primary game of X and Y is admittedly lackluster. Going back further, Super Contests being better than Ruby and Sapphire's contests didn't absolve Diamond and Pearl of their major flaws. Platinum had to swoop in to iron them out separately. A side feature equivalent to musicals simply isn't important enough to patch up legitimate flaws of any game. And by that same logic, it's certainly not important enough to actively make a game worse. While it would have been nice if musicals were more fun to play, we can't look at games, or any piece of media, from a shoulda coulda woulda perspective. We have to look at what they are. And what Black and White are incredible games. I'd argue the best in the mainline Pokémon series without the need for musicals. But regardless of where you may feel Black and White fall in comparison with other Pokémon titles, the fact still remains. The games as a whole simply would not be better if musicals were better. Only musicals would be better if musicals were better.